I've gone through and pinned my U-seam together. I pinned it at the top. I pinned it at this seam at the bottom so that they line up right on top of each other. Sorry, it's hard to see in that video, but watch the last one if you didn't do that already. And at the top here, at my notches, and then everywhere in between, about every 3 to 4 inches, I have a pin. And it's really important to have this pin together here because when you sew a curve, your fabric just moves a little bit more and it's a little bit trickier. So we're going to be sewing a curve here. We're going to sew it at 5/8 inch seam allowance. We'll sew it one time and then we're going to go over the seam with 5/8 inch seam allowance again, just to give it a second time to really reinforce it, because this seam you do not want to have come undone. This is a really important seam in our pants. We're going to sew it at 5/8 inch seam allowance. I will backstitch at the beginning and the end, and then I'll sew the whole thing again. So this is my 5/8 inch right here. You can see it says 5/8 there, so I'm going to line it up with 5/8. I will backstitch, remove any pins as I go. I want to watch and make sure that this seam allowance stays open. So I pinned it open. Hopefully it stays, but as I get close, I will look at that a little more. So we'll sew, and we'll backstitch, and then we'll continue on. I have my threads behind as I sew so they don't get tangled. And I'll continue down this U. If I ever feel like I need another pin, I'm just going to add it in as I go. If things are slipping, I'll just add a pin in. And I'm approaching my seam allowance here, so I'm just going to make sure. I'll use my hand wheel, pulling my thumb towards me like this. So I'm going to pull over here on the left or the right side of my machine. I will use my hand wheel to lower my needle down. That way I can lift up my presser foot and make sure the seam allowance gets tucked under there. Now I'll put my presser foot back down and continue sewing. And I'll keep the seam allowance tucked under. Continue around here. Doing my best to keep a 5/8 inch seam allowance this whole time. Removing pins. So I've sewed this the first time, and I'm going to go through and do it a second time, just like I did this time, but instead I'm not going to have any pins to pull out. I would line it up. I'm not going to show you the whole thing in the video, but I'll show you how I'll start. I'll pull my threads back behind. I'll line up everything at 5/8 inch seam allowance again, back stitch, and then I would just continue down all the way around until I get to the end of the U and back stitch again.